This is Whitley Strieber, and you're listening to My Alien Life.
And this huge UFO just came down, appeared out of nowhere. And he had to turn to go towards North Vietnam, and he couldn't because this thing was in his way. So he had to immediately drop altitude, go down to almost skinning the ocean. And as he was going down, he saw this craft come down and go into the ocean and disappear.
Well, it's interesting, when anything comes out of the New York Times, I immediately, it's being green lighted by, I guess you'd call it the deep state or whatever. Dr. Eric Davis has come out in the New York Times, several months ago, saying that, he's briefing, Department of Defense on reverse engineering, and kind of implying that we haven't made much progress. As you know, we have made a lot of progress.
My Alien Life is recorded high atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is heard all over the world, and you can listen everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you'll find links to every episode, stories, photos, and much more. I'm your host, Cam Logan. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Tonight, I am joined by Richard Doty and Dan Willis. Rick Doty is a retired special agent who has worked for the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation. Dan Willis is one of the Disclosure Project's top secret military witnesses that testified at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2001. Tonight, there are no subjects off limits as we talk about UFOs, aliens, and the U.S. government's secret programs. And of course, we will talk about what the U.S. government may or may not know about UFOs and what they may or may not be telling us in the next days or weeks about their admitted video evidence surrounding UAP sightings by our military and implications of those sightings. I'm Cameron Logan. That and more is coming right up on My Alien Life.
I just like to say I'm honored and excited to join Richard and you to, considering his wealth of information. I just watched the full series on Gaia where Emery was interviewing you, Richard, and, looking at all the information. I got about 24 questions lined up, and I don't know if we'll get to them all, but I'm kind of excited to do this.
Thank you, Dan, and that's an excellent starting point. Rick, can you talk about your appearances on Gaia?
Well, I have 20 episodes on Gaia with Emery Smith. Currently on there is about 20, and then there's, I think, 4 or 6 more that will be aired this fall. There are a wide range of topics that I did during my time in the with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and then some topics pertaining to my employment with the Institute for Advanced Studies at Austin. Worked for Dr. Putoff. So that's what those episodes contain.
And Dan, since you were interested in that, go ahead and ask Rick a couple of questions, and we could just kind of start from here, because I think that your insight is usually excellent. And I'd love to hear from you.
You know, I come from a military family, Richard, and my father was a career Marine, World War II, Korean War, Presidential Citation. My brother was in the Air Force. I served in the Navy with a top secret crypto and naval communications. I also served in combat action on the rivers of Vietnam. You know, I was one of the 20 witnesses that testified back in 2001, Dr. Greer's disclosure project, the National Press Club. You know, myself being an ex-ABC newsman, I naively thought the testimonies at the time would be a world-changing event, and didn't realize at that time that our mainstream media had been infiltrated by control elements to keep this information from the general public. I've been researching ever since, you know, looking into this. My motivation for involvement in all this, there exists potentially an entirely different world that could be realized for everyone on this planet if the elements that have suppressed these highly advanced technologies and the extraterrestrial exchanges were released for the good of humanity, and would allow, the needless deception and suffering on this planet to end. You know, for years I've been trying to sort out the full picture through all the disinformation in the UFO communities and everything. So yeah, I'm kind of excited to exchange questions, and I'm kind of a minor player. I see myself in all this. I just have one testimony. I haven't had years of experience like you have, Richard.
Well, thanks for that. Thanks for you explaining your background, and thanks for your service.
Yes, thank you both.
My dad was also in the service, and my uncle was in service, and I think the UFO community has done a lot of good trying to get this out in a disclosure fashion, but I think deep inside, they've harmed themselves, because there's so much infighting within the UFO community. I saw it at, I just came from the 2021 UFO MegaCon at Laughlin, and although all the presentations were quite well received, privately speaking with UFO investigators, I find that there's a vast difference of opinions amongst the UFO group, especially within MUFON. And that doesn't do any good to this future disclosure that we hope will occur, which I have doubts about. And there's so much infighting that has been for years. I remember at one UFO convention some years ago, when Phil Klass was still alive, Phil got up and spoke, and Phil said that, addressing the entire crowd, he said, "You guys do more to harm yourselves from within than I could ever do from outside," and that there's no truer words ever spoken. There's, one person will write a book, and then the other one will write a book that's contrary to that book, and then there's infighting, and so there's a lot of backstabbing. So there is an agenda out there. If people within the UFO community could keep it on track, I think we could somehow force a disclosure in the future.
Rick, I think you made a good point there, and one of the things about myself, I would have to admit that I'm super opinionated, but my strongest opinion is the fact that I don't like people that have really, really strong opinions and lose their objectivity. So are you basically speaking of that? Is that what you're saying? A loss of objectivity? Yes,
there's definitely a loss of objectivity. And there's so much disinformation. And of course, me speaking of this, supposedly the disinformation expert, so to speak. But yeah. There's a good explanation I can talk about later on that. But there's so much disinformation, exaggeration, strong opinions. I agree there. Exactly. Strong opinions some people are so opinionated that they close their minds, they go at it with tunnel vision, and they won't listen to or hear anyone else. And when I got into this, after I left government service and went into the private sector, and I learned a lot. I certainly wasn't, contrary to popular opinion, I didn't know it all. As Dan would can attest to this. Even if you have a top secret security clearance with, expanded background investigation and access to, all the different caveats, if you don't have a need to know something, you're not going to know it.
Right.
An example I have is that I worked at Area 51. I worked in an office with 4 other agents, and all of us had different jobs. We had different accesses. And believe it or not, I didn't know what my partner across the cubicle was doing, fully doing. I might know peripherally what he was doing, but I didn't know exactly what he was doing. And he didn't know what I was doing. And now if I needed to help him or he needed to help me on something, then I'd have to go to another office on the other side of the base, sit down and get my tickets punched, so to speak, to get access to that program. That's how tight it was. And it's not just there, Area 51, and even at Kirtland when I was working there, it's the same thing. So just a side note here, I didn't have access to everything, although people are claiming, well, you must know it all because you had a high level security clearance. No, I didn't. But after I left government service, I learned a lot. I learned from people within the UFO community. I learned from people who had retired agents, retired intelligence officers, a lot of things that I just didn't know about. And that enlightened me. It really, really did. And then I'm thoroughly convinced, anyone working within the government, thoroughly convinced that there's what we call a home front, or an area where people can look in and see the government, the military working side by side. And there's that deep hole, that deep black void that the government controls. And all this top secret information pertaining to UFOs and other things are controlled by that deep, deep, deep black void.
Compartmentalization works well.
And
Yes.
Dan, you certainly have a lot of experience with the fact that I'm sure you believe that, as well as there's a deep, deep, dark control over information, not only from the government and the military, but within the media.
Yeah, it's when I testified in front of all those cameras at the National Press Club, I didn't even know what Operation Mockingbird was, even though, since I had my military experience, just briefly in 1969, I was working at the Naval Communications Station in San Francisco. It was like the major communication hub on the planet for the military passing traffic. I was a certified high-speed code operator. Teletype sometimes doesn't get through and you have to use code. There was a ship off the coast of Alaska that was reporting a 70-foot diameter disc about glowing reddish orange off port bow that the crew witnessed. Came out of the ocean, shot straight up into space. This is off the coast of Alaska, going over 7,000 miles per hour, according to the radar blips. What, Richard, this is kind of a question, but hey, you don't ask questions, you don't get answers. What do you think that might have been in 1969? You get ET or US or Nazis or inner Earth civilization, or what do you think that might have been?
I think it was a legitimate ET craft. If I would have been in the military back then, I would try to convince you that it was something otherwise. But no, I honestly, I know of that incident. I've heard you speak of it. I heard another somebody in Alaska talk about seeing it. So I think it's the description. I mean, you certainly were there at the controls. You saw it. You saw what it was doing, defying anything that we could be flying back in 1969. I mean,
Right.
I know that the government is always ahead of us in technology. I mean, I saw it at Area 51. I mean, I saw things flying that I thought were ETs, but I, come to find out it was just experimental crafts, none of which, other than the 117, was ever made. There's a lot of things that they test out there, but for some reason or other, it didn't work. But something that big and going that fast, it would defy gravity. It would defy the G-force exerted on our pilots, and hundreds of G's rather than the 10 that a pilot could withstand. So I think my opinion would be it was an extraterrestrial craft.
Yeah, it was a secret priority going chief naval operation. According to the naval intelligence and the Soviet intelligence too, more than half of the UFOs coming in and out of our planet are coming out of our oceans. You think the Air Force is aware of underwater bases that are ET or otherwise on the planet?
That's something I learned about later. I never saw anything written. I never saw any highly classified documents that pertain to anything coming out of the sea. I read some stories of Navy pilots. One particular story, I'm sure you know about this, a Navy pilot leaving an aircraft carrier on a mission in Vietnam and off the coast of Vietnam. I wasn't in Vietnam, so I really, really admire people who have been. But this pilot, he spoke at a UFO convention many years ago, and he said, I was taken off, and I think it was an A4, I believe it was an A4, maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think it was an A4 something, a jet that was taken off an aircraft carrier, and it got to like 10,000 feet, and this huge UFO just came down, it appeared out of nowhere, and he had to turn to go towards North Vietnam, and he couldn't because this thing was in his way. So he had to immediately drop altitude, go down to almost skinning the ocean. And as he was going down, he saw this craft come down and go into the ocean and disappear.
Yeah, there's a lot of activity out there in the big ocean that we have. This is kind of a loaded question. I saw you interviewed by Dr. Greer a long time ago, Dr. Stephen Greer. Dr. Greer has stated publicly he believes that all the extraterrestrials are benevolent and that the witnesses that have witnessed predatory extraterrestrial types have had false memory implants. Your thoughts on why he would say that, knowing in your own personal experience that some species are indeed predatory?
I don't agree with him on that issue. Privately, I spoke with him off camera. I spent 2.5 hours being interviewed by him, and I think he only aired about an hour of it, an hour and 5 minutes or something. So there's a lot of things I said on there that really contradicted what his beliefs were, and he cut them out, which kind of upset me. But no, I don't agree with him on that. I think I know for a fact that there are some hostile species visiting Earth, have visited Earth. I think President Reagan said it best when he referred to hostile extraterrestrials. And no, there are other creatures visiting our planet that are doing strange things to us, involved in abductions, involved in mutilating cattle, and probably many other things that we haven't found out about yet.
Yeah, I see his angle on, he does the CE5 where people go out and make contact, and you wouldn't want to have in the back of your mind that, some might want to eat you or something. But, and the fact that, the Werner von Braun's false flag event that they're planning, the industrial military complex wants to do this false flag event in the future, that you don't want to feed that reality. But at the same time, it's kind of discrediting when you have witnesses over great expanses of time that are credible. Not all of them had, they do have the technology to alter people's memory, according to a lot of, secret space program witnesses and things. But to make that statement, anybody who does a lot of in-depth research on this, it's discrediting. So it always confused me why he does that.
I don't know. He has an agenda, and I don't support all of his agenda. I support some of it. I mean, I think he's in the forefront of getting some of this out there. But the problem is whether it's going to be properly received by the public.
Well, and there's definitely people shell out a huge amount of money for that, and they do it on a regular basis. I'm not sure what the draw is anymore on attendees and what that would actually look like, but it's not a cheap process to hang out with Dr. Greer.
Yeah, and to his credit, though, he has done a lot of incredible work, and
yes,
I had a lot of courage. He had his life threatened to not go before the the National Press Club back in 2001. So, but everybody's got their own angle on this.
When you were go ahead, Rick.
I agree. He actually, I think, was visited on 3 different occasions by the new, I guess I would call them a new Men in Black, where he was threatened and he was surveilled. And I think he has good evidence that his phones were even bugged. Now, whether they were by the FBI or by some kind of private entity, I don't know. But he had courage enough to continue on, and that didn't stop him.
What about you two? You both have a tremendous amount of information. You've had experience plus. I mean, obviously, you both have been in reality. You've been around the military, and you have information regarding that. My big question always is top secret clearance and what that actually means. So, Rick, I've asked you in the past why you're able to talk about, with impunity what you do talk about, and Dan as well. Are you really able to talk with impunity, or has there been incidents that have bothered you or have made you change your tone and back off a little bit?
Well, I had I signed a security oath in 1988, and it expired. However, there are some things, and I'm sure Dan will also attest to this, there's some things that I had access to that I know is still classified in some realm. Sources and methods of collection, I would never disclose any of those. And there's some projects that I worked on that involving the subject of UFOs and abductions that I just don't think that I would want to talk about. But on the other hand, I have been visited. In 2003, the FBI came and got and seized my hard drives because of a book that was written, Exempt from Disclosure, by Robert Collins. The government claimed that some of the material in there was still classified, and Collins claimed that I gave it to him, which was absolutely false. The investigation proved it wasn't me. It was somebody else that worked at Los Alamos, and they was investigated and taken care of. And I was cleared of any wrongdoing, but it really wasn't a criminal investigation against me. They were just doing an inquiry. And I voluntarily gave up my hard drive. In return, they gave it back, and also they paid me for, they didn't get me back. I have been called before by some people that were still in the government, still in the intelligence arena. And when I made a statement about something, I spoke at a UFO convention right around 2000. And I still was under non-disclosure agreement, and I didn't say anything that was classified. If you go back and listen to that, I just talked about the Paul Benowitz case, which had been, most of it had been, not all of it, but some of it had been released. And I carefully skirted around all the classified stuff. So I didn't say anything regarding that. But a certain person at headquarters OSI called me and said, "Hey, Rick," I mean, he was actually came out of the OSI Academy with me way back. He left the military and went into as a civil service employee with the agency. But he called me and really nonchalantly told me that, you're being watched. What you say, you got to be careful what you say out there, and you want to say too much. And I said, well, I didn't disclose anything classified. Yeah, but you're getting really, really close. You get really close to the edge there. And, if you say something that we might have to do something about it. I said, you threaten me? Oh, absolutely not. I would never threaten.
No.
I really like you. We really got along when we worked together. And I said, okay, I'll take your advice on it. But, a few years later, my oath expired. So I opened up on most fronts.
And how about you, Dan? I know that, you had some experiences in the military that obviously you weren't talking about at the time. And I'm specifically talking about the when you had to code that information about the UFO. So, do you take some of that to your grave, or are you freely talking about everything that's happened?
Well, my background is pale compared to what Richard's involvement.
Yeah.
But our legal counsel, because a lot of the witnesses that joined me had top secret clearances and were potentially breaking national security oaths. But according to Daniel Sheehan, our legal counsel, is that the elements that are operating illegal, that are trying to control this, they cannot use the rule of law against the witnesses. That's his interpretation of that. I've never had any issue. Of course, I'm not. I'm primarily I've been researching ever since 1969, off and on through the years. Met with Bob Lazar outside Area 51 back in '93 and recorded that. And just been ever since 2001 trying to understand how our media became so centrally controlled and who's behind it, because that event with, talking about, 57 different species categorized, nukes being shut down, bases on the other side of the moon, NASA airbrushing out, the UFOs, and the astronauts told to keep secret what happened when they went to the moon, and 0 point energy. We've had faster than light craft, made back in the 50s, and that President CIA directors are being denied access. All of this, any one of them, it happened to get through the evening news, just like Carl Wolf said, about the bases on the other side of the moon. And here it is 30 years ago today, and I hope to hear it on the evening news. And it never went on the evening news. They effectively sanitized it and made it sound like we wanted to have a congressional hearing on simply the reality of UFOs, right? So doing a limited hangout like that, it really didn't get the public's attention, but it went viral on the internet, inspired a lot of people. I haven't had any issues with security, but I have a question on in your Gaia interview, Richard, with Emery Smith. You stated that the Nordic race were dangerous and hostile. It kind of conflicts with reports of them being benevolent, such as the Eisenhower first contact meeting back in '54, and the Navy's secret space program, Solar Warden, has been assisted with a Nordic race. Could you elaborate on that? Why the confliction on that?
Sure. First of all, I was never fully briefed in to that program. It was highly classified, compartmented. I had access to what I needed to know about the different races. And when we talk about different ET races that have visited Earth in the 80s, and I'm only talking about the 80s, the document I saw and read listed just 5 of them. And that document listed, described them, but there were some things that were left out of what I read. And one of them, which I found out later, pertained to the Nordic and some of the incidents that contributed to them harming or threatening humans. And that's why what I was referring to during that interview, the actual, the one race that I knew had evidence of hostilities was the Nordics.
So I understand there's like Nordics that are hostile and Nordics that are benevolent, just the same as reptilians. There are actually some, I don't have any direct experience, but, some are benevolent and some are hostile or predatory. So, I guess it's racist, to kind of lump them all into one particular category. But, with Clifford Stone, saying by 1989, when he got out, there was, he had a little medical book that for doing crash retrievals to patch these guys up, the different silicone based or carbon based or how to do medical procedures, that they had a book of 57 different species in 89. So I would imagine that has expanded considerably since then.
Well, yeah, I've spoke with Clifford many times. He's a fellow New Mexican here. We have a difference of opinion on a lot of different things. He explained what the Army did as far as the recovery teams went. I knew that the Air Force had, and I spoke about this at the recent convention. Our team was called the SDART team, Special Down Aircraft Recovery Team. It was the team itself, and that designation was even classified just secret. It contained scientists, security personnel, special hazardous material people, and when I spoke to Clifford, Clifford had an entirely different description of their team, and he claimed, and God bless him, he passed away, of course, and
yeah,
he was a great great spokesman within the UFO community. But he talked about linguists. He talked that the team had humans that could speak, I think, 40 or 50 different ET languages.
Oh my God!
And I never heard about that. I all my time in, and I was only in the in OSI from 78 to 88. We may know about it. I was never briefed into it, but he actually gave us a name of a person that had been a linguist, and I spoke to this guy on the phone. He was probably up in his 80s, and this was back in about 2009 or 2010. The guy was as sharp as a tack. I said he probably 8. I don't know exactly what his age was exactly, but I spoke to him on the phone at great length, and he told me stories about how he was trained. He was trained by the ETs that we had in captivity. They taught him languages, and he was one of the people, one of the humans that was capable of learning language really easily. I mean, some of us can and some of us can't. And he claimed that there was a special school underground at the National Security Agency that these ETs would teach these languages. Now, this guy sounded as authentic as he could be. And at the end, I asked him if I could just check out some things about him. I did. Now, I'm an alumni from the Defense Language Institute. I went there for German language, so I'm capable of still getting online and checking things and even taking courses. And come to find out, that guy was in fact he's learned 2 languages there. He learned Bulgarian and he learned Romanian, and at different times, of course. And he did work for the United States Army. He was in the Army Security Command. He did retire from the Army. So I haven't found anything. He's long dead now, of course, but maybe he did. I'm not going to say he didn't. And I will never doubt Clifford. I mean, Clifford makes some wild stories, which it's hard for me to believe, but I'm not going to call him a liar because maybe he did something that I didn't know about.
Well, like you mentioned in the beginning, all we can really do is look for indicators, indications of, you can't ever lock your mind on saying, oh, this is it. Absolutely. Oh, I know the truth. You can't ever do that with a subject because there's so many layers of not only disinformation, but, trying to piece it all together. I've been, I have a question on, regarding after, Operation High Jump, a bird being defeated by the Nazi craft down there in 1946, and then followed later by apparent intimidation of the Capitol flyover in 1952. Did you ever learn of Eisenhower kind of an agreement surrender that was made in 1955 with the Nazi infiltration?
Are you directing that to me or Dan?
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
No. I heard. I heard from open source press and so forth, and read, of course, a couple books that detailed it. But no, officially within the government, I never read or seen anything like that.
That seems to be like a pivotal point in history. During the Eisenhower administration, it was a tumultuous, with ET interactions and agreements and everything. Ever since Eisenhower essentially lost control during that time, the MJ-12 and CIA elements, and every president, CIA director, Kennedy, Carter, Woolsey, and then it was, out in 1993, I met with a group of researchers outside Area 51. They're a little alien. They set up a tent, and the first time Bob Lazar went public, and I was sitting in the front row. No recordings were allowed, but I couldn't help it. I recorded the full 2 hours of him being hit with a lot of questions for 2 hours. And apparently that freaked the base out, these meetings that were out there. And a NRO classified security advisory got issued to all the base personnel, to avoid contact with these people or disciplinary issues or everything. Anyway, on that document, they had a distribution list of public knowledge special access programs like Cosmic Ops and Magi Ops that were, dealing with the extraterrestrial issue. That document somehow got into the hands of Dr. Greer, and he had a meeting at the Pentagon, as you're aware of, with astronaut Edgar Mitchell and Commander Will Miller, with Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson, the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who looked into it and found that it did exist, but he was denied access. He wasn't on the bigot list, I guess they call it. He was pretty frustrated because they basically told him he didn't backdrop the issue. He was going to see early retirement and lose rank. And he told Dr. Greer, if you can get your people willing to testify under oath and go before the mainstream media, you have my permission. This group is illegal, quote unquote. And that's what essentially greenlighted the event that I participated in 2001. Where was I going with that? Anyway, there was some direction I was going with that, but I lost track. But anyway, you're aware of all that?
Some of it, yeah. I've heard people talk about it, and I have had people. Well, we talked to a retired Air Force colonel who was a B-52 pilot, and then went on to work for National Security Agency. He told us that him just going to these UFO conventions when he was still active duty could get him disciplined, and he said, and they said we would stick a letter of reprimand in your personnel file, and that would cease all future promotions. I mean, that would be tough for an officer if you get a letter of reprimand. And but he didn't care. He said, you know what, do it, because I know where the files are, and I'll take people to those files. And so he eventually was in a he went to Florida. He was telling us a story. He went to Florida. He rented a vehicle. He flew into Miami, rented a vehicle. He was going to go up to visit an old buddy of his that lived north of Miami. He stopped at a gas station to get gas and something, and his car caught fire, destroyed everything in there, including his briefcase with information in there. Now, is that a coincidence? I mean, it's a rental vehicle, brand new vehicle. He said it had like 1,000 miles on it. You know, and when he made a claim to the rental car company, I think it was Hertz. Hertz says he was talking to them. He was filling out a form, and the clerk said to him, "We're not going to pay for that briefcase." He never told this clerk there was a briefcase in the vehicle.
Oh.
Now you tell me that. You tell me how that isn't a conspiracy.
Yeah, a lot of things that are coincidences aren't.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember what I was going to ask you about that with Admiral Wilson. When he stated that these operations are illegal, in other words, he had to meet with the corporate contractors, Lockheed, no doubt, that were, overseeing this unacknowledged special access program, reverse engineering the ET technology. He said these operations, because he believed that he had the constitutional authority that should have allowed him access. Do you agree with the Admiral on this, that these operations are illegal?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the contractors controlling it, or
him
the
being in his constitutional authority as head of intelligence for the JCS, being denied access.
No, not knowing how the government operates 100% of the time, that's a difficult question, because in some respects it could be truthful, and on the other side of it, it may not be. I know a lot of stories. I mean, I talked to Lieutenant Colonel Corso a number of times. We even had him down at the Institute for Advanced Studies with Dr. Putoff. And there's things that he didn't put in his book that he told us about. But he said if I ever mentioned this stuff, I'd either would be killed, or they'd send me to Leavenworth for 20 years. So Wilson, I don't know. It's I could see in some respects. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and I do know something about the law. That would be an interesting question to talk to Danny Sheehan, which I spent almost a whole week with at New Laughlin. I mean, what a brilliant man who's on our side.
Yeah, would be. This is a highly attacked and censored question. some of the secret space program witnesses claim that President Eisenhower, after he lost control, set in place and you'd think he would, being the man that, set up the plan for the Normandy invasion, that a 5-star general, being denied access, that he probably, it seems logical, he would set up a plan for an institutional future safeguard to protect our constitutional republic with a secret military intelligence group. Have you heard of that? And is this possibly related to the highly attacked and censored Q posts, claiming to be from military intelligence alerting the public?
I don't know a whole lot about that. The only thing I knew about the secret space program pertained to the deep space probes that we launched back in, this was classified. I don't believe it's classified anymore because I've read things about this in fact, I think Prominent Magazine here about 10, 12 years ago spoke about it. But the only thing I know about the secret space program is we launched deep space probes beginning in 1977 when Voyager 1 and 2 took off. Everybody's attention was to Florida for those launches, but we were out at Vandenberg Air Force Base sending up these secret, highly classified probes that went deep out in space and set up like a net around our solar system, watching for what? Well, probably UFOs. I knew the names of each one of these, and there were a number of them between 77 through the 80s. That's the only thing I've ever read about the secret space program. Now, these other things that you mentioned, I've read in open sources. I've heard people talk about it. I mean, Guy gave a presentation out at Laughlin about the secret space program, but what he's saying about the secret space program is that we have technology to go light speed or faster than light speed. We have technology that can travel from one point to another through wormholes. We have technology that can, you can leave the planet on June 1st and arrive back because you're traveling faster than the speed of light on June 1st. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if any of this stuff is real. Also, he's talking about fighting wars on other planets. The big thing right now is Pluto. Supposedly, they are some ET race is trying to take over Pluto, and we had to launch a special Marine Force, a deep space unit to go up there to fight the battle. I don't know if I believe any of that.
Yeah, meaning more specifically the plan that was put in place, and when you have the mainstream media, deleting thousands of accounts and just going on full on attack every way possible, calling it a deranged, far right, violent Nazi cult, whatever, all this stuff, you just wonder if this, since the mainstream media, which has been my focus, being an ex-ABC newsman, I'm looking at, it was 22 cameras in the back row, and all of them, just sanitized the information that was being released. That there is definitely elements that are control elements that are keeping the public from aware of this information, and that they would have to use a back channel on the internet in order to go around all these controlled information outlets in order to alert the public. And, it went, millions of people are aware of it, and, hundreds of thousands of accounts were, deleted that even mention it, so obviously it was I just look at things that are highly censored, and it makes me want to look deeper into why they're censoring things. So I was just curious if you happen to hear anything about a plan that was set in place back in the Eisenhower era, and if And if the 17th letter of the alphabet that we have to say is somehow related to that.
Well, let me tell you about this. One of our missions within the intelligence, in the form of a counterintelligence operation, is to know the press, know and try to control the press. That's written in classified counterintelligence manuals. And now, when I say counterintelligence, I'm talking about disinformation or misinformation. Although you won't read that word, those two words in a counterintelligence operations manual. It's just going to say counterintelligence operation against something. One of the jobs that we had at Kirtland Air Force Base was to set up a counterintelligence net around the base to protect the base. Now, that's a legitimate thing that the government should do. We want to protect the base, so we're going to recruit people outside the base. We're going to recruit mostly retired military people who live close proximity to the base to be our eyes and ears. But what we also did was we recruited local news media. We would make contact with the local news media, and we would vet them. And we're talking about the television stations in Albuquerque and the newspapers. Back in those days, they had two main newspapers. And get to know the people, get to know the news people, the people who are out in the field collecting the news, getting the news, talking to witnesses, and then somehow recruit them to inform us of what's happening. And we had a pretty good system there in Albuquerque. I didn't do it all. There were other agents that we had a female agent working for us who was a pro at doing this, recruiting people, especially within the press. And we had the press, I should say, on our side totally, but when something was reported to the press, to the news media that pertained to the base, they would immediately notify us. Now, they did it one of two ways. They would covertly notify us, notify their contacts, and say, "Hey, listen, we just got this story about this occurring," like the Paul Binowitz case, for example. They got the information about Paul Binowitz, and that was brought to me saying, "Hey, the press knows about Paul Binowitz. What do we want to do about it?" I said, "We don't want that story out right now." So we convinced the press. I mean, the one station that had it, and I would say the press, was just one television station. It was an NBC affiliate. We convinced them to hold on to the story. And what we promised them was, listen, if you hold on to this right now, we're going to give you an exclusive later on. And as you know, working for ABC, that's what you want, is something exclusive. And so every base, whether it be Air Force, Army, Marines, Navy, going to have the same setup.
Sure.
And not just them. The FBI is going to have it. The DEA is going to have it. The ATF is going to have it. And so we try, and that's a way that we're doing down in the field level to get information from the press. Now, on the other hand, just think of what our headquarters and the intelligence community above us is doing on their connections with the press at a higher level.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. The highest level, CBS interviewed me and I said, well, I'm not willing to do this interview unless I can show you this little short sentence that we have the scientists willing to prove before an open congressional hearing, we have 0-point energy to alleviate the need for nuclear oil and coal. They promised up and down, interviewed me for 45 minutes afterward. The producer of the show, she was almost in tears. I said, I know I promised, but the higher executives made me cut that part out. And we know who the higher executives are.
Well, when I started, when I was hired by Gaia, started my episodes at Gaia, I had a particular prominent news agency make contact with me and say they'd like to interview me. And I said, sure, no problem. They flew me to, they were going to fly me to Washington, D.C. Or they flew me to Washington, D.C. I was going to have they were going to do an interview And the background is going to be the CIA building, DIA, and all that. Anyways, they interviewed me for 2 hours, asking me all sorts of questions. And that was in 2017. That interview has never been aired.
Mm.
Why? I don't know why.
Whole 2 hours too. Wow.
Yeah.
That meeting I had with Robert Lazar, at the S4 facility, he said that Operation Looking Glass was operational in that area, and that they told him anyway, how compartmentalization is, that he could only see milliseconds and variations and, going into the future or the past. Do you know if in truth that we could possibly view much further in time, as some witnesses claim?
Okay. First of all, let me set the story straight about S4 and S2. I was there. I was briefed in. I went to Papoose Lake. I had a clearance to get into the upper level. The complex was called S2. You go into the administrative support section of that complex, and it's called S2. The entire complex is called S2. That's the entry control point. That's where vehicles are parked. That's where all the electric vehicles run. That's the security checkpoint. 4 levels down is S4. That's where Lazar worked. He talked about S4 being the complexes. That's not the complex. S4 is just a 4th level area where Bob Lazar worked. Now, I never had access to S4. I could never go down there. I just didn't have the security clearance, and I didn't have the need to know. But I did go to S2 on a number of occasions to conduct investigations or some other reason. I asked Bob Lazar, how do you get, there's a distinct way to get into S2. There's 4 things you have to do to get in there. Bob knew all of them. So that made me think Bob Lazar was there. He knew things. He knew where to turn. He knew where the elevators were. Unless you've been there,
Right.
You wouldn't have known any of that.
Yeah, he's always been consistent over the decades. He hasn't varied on his testimony whatsoever.
Now, getting back to Looking Glass, I worked on an operation, highly classified. It had nothing to do with UFOs, but I was a counterintelligence officer for a very highly classified operation that was actually not occurring at Groom Lake or Area 51. It was occurring over at Nevada Test Site, which is now the Nevada National Security Site. They had built an underground facility over there, a huge underground facility that is still probably somewhat classified with huge magnets and all sorts of other gadgets. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know everything that was down there. And what they were trying to do is exactly what you asked, is look into the future. And they were able to open up a portal. Now, what that portal, how they did it, I don't know. What they saw in that portal, I don't know. But I just knew that they were, and this was in 1980, probably 83, 84 timeframe.
Interesting.
Now, when I worked for the Institute for Advanced Studies, I can't go into a lot of details of what I did out there because it's all proprietary. But there was one aspect of what we did and where we went that showed something that the government is doing through DARPA that is probably 100 times better than what they were doing in 1984. That's about all I can say about it. So can we? I think we can. How far? I don't know. But just the ability of looking into the future, we can do.
Oh, when Admiral Wilson was denied access, he was pretty pissed, and he had a meeting outside the EG&G building with astrophysicist Dr. Eric Davis, and apparently he recorded and got transcribed and got leaked on the internet. And in the transcription, they were saying that, quote, UFOs are real, abductions are not. Do you think this is because of what Dr. Greer calls, quote, stagecraft or MILAB abductions done by the military? And if you know of this, for what purpose and what elements do you think are involved in doing these staged events?
Well, that's one area where I have some knowledge of incidents that the government has done things that is embarrassing to the government, is even embarrassing to me because unfortunately I had some role in it. But there's cases where the government was responsible for setting something up to look like an alien abduction, but in actuality it wasn't an alien abduction. And I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to go into any great details.
Okay.
You talk about Eric Davis. I worked with him at the Institute for Advanced Study with Dr. Put brilliant man, has a clearance well above what I would have ever had, along with Dr. Hal Putoff. If there's one person that would know inside and out about advanced technology, it would be Dr. Davis and Dr. Putoff.
Well, it's interesting, when anything comes out of the New York Times, I immediately, it's being green lighted by, I guess you'd call it the deep state or whatever. Dr. Eric Davis has come out in the New York Times, several months ago, saying that, he's briefing, Department of Defense on reverse engineering, and kind of implying that we haven't made much progress. But, you have, as you know, we have made a lot of progress. And I'm just wondering if there is some kind of we've made little progress type of agenda.
Well, what I was told, which I actually read in a document, is the first race, and I started in 1947 because my briefing that occurred in 1978 at Kirtland at the Special Security Office regarding our contacts and our relationship in the UFO and ET arena began in 1947. And the technology that we obtained from the Roswell craft and the 47 craft we found at Corona and the one in 49 we found up at Horse Mesa, west of Magdalena, we couldn't understand it. Now, one of the things that we found in the craft was what we thought in 1949 era was a window. And what they would do is over the years, scientists, mostly at Los Alamos, but also at other research facilities such as Sandia Labs, would bring out these items and try to look at them in a different respect, and try to understand it because the technology was so advanced. Well, some years later in the 70s, we found out that window was actually the energy device that was running the ship. And so I was told, and I've seen it, that the technology is so advanced that we just can't understand it now.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by Elion. You can find all Elion's work online at Heart Dance Records.